you very much, and we're also happy to be part of this conference these 3 days, and really to be able to share the experience that we have from Kenya. I want to appreciate Gustavo for setting the stage for me and really sharing what the journey we've gone in the last 20 years. We were established about in 2003, so we have been in this space for about 22 years. Within the 22 years, we've been able to go through two legal framework changes. One was because of a change in the governance framework in our country, where in 2010 we introduced devolution, and the water sector then had to align to that governance framework in the country. The second change was last year, and because of what WASREB was seen to have done, then there was a change in the legal framework to introduce pricing as a mandate for WASREB, pricing for irrigation waters. So those are the two legal frameworks that we've gone through in the last 22 years. But really, I will join my colleagues and say it is a journey in terms of evolving and adapting to the changes that the sector has. So I'll basically share the experience from Kenya and just give a brief in terms of how we are legally established. So our mandate basically is anchored in the Constitution, which really provides for a Bill of Rights. And within that Bill of Rights is really the provision that citizens have the right to safe and clean water in adequate quantities, and also the country had a lot of, we were not making the required gains in terms of water resources management, and also water service provision had not really developed as we would have wished to see. So on one hand, on one side of this pyramid of functions is WASREB on the right, whose mandate is to regulate water and sanitation services provision. On the left side of it is the Water Resources Authority, which has the mandate of water resources management and allocation. I'll focus on the right so that in the interest of time, below the regulator, county governments. In a case where this water service provision cuts across more than one county, then that mandate is rested with the waterworks development agencies in terms of bulk water service provision. And then below that is the water service providers. And just to mention, looking at the numbers, Saudi Arabia is about 4 times in landmass the size of Kenya. Our population is about twice the population of Saudi, but again, within that space, we have about 95 water service providers. The architecture of, and which Gustavo has quite spoken to, is that we went into commercializing water service provision in what we call socially responsible commercialization. So the water service providers, there are about 95 of these, are state-owned enterprises, but operating within in a commercial sense. So they're established under the Companies Act, but owned entirely by the county governments. So the framework that links the mandate of the water service providers to regulation is really licensing. So the license is really the tool that provides for obligations for the water service providers. I'll not really dwell on this because it has been summarized. Regulators set the vision for the sector. We develop secondary legislations. Once the law has been enacted, then to operationalize that law, then we need secondary legislation. We issue tools and, in a nutshell, provide advice to the public in terms of water and sanitation matters. That's our mandate. We have or with a license. And the law has quite outlined, the requirement that you can't provide water services without the authority of a license. I think this has already also been spoken to. We have to balance those interests. For our cases, the two levels of government, consumers, and water service providers. Let me quickly look at the tools that we have developed to operationalize our mandate. We have subsidiary legislation that then supports the mother law that has been enacted. We have license conditions, so the licenses issued to the water service providers have conditions in the different areas of operations of these entities, from technical aspects, financial aspects, to human resources aspects. Then we have corporate governance standards. I think it's been mentioned that as we look to the future, then corporate governance really becomes the mother in terms of how utilities should fashion themselves in terms of water service provision. Drinking water quality guidelines, tariff setting guidelines, as a means of building economies of scale for water service utilities, we have enacted what we call clustering guidelines to, in a structured manner, be able to guide utilities in matters of aggregations. Then we have non-revenue water standards, consumer engagement standards, and the last one is really a monitoring tool that we have established that looks at the annual performance of water service providers. License conditions, this in a nutshell provides what the utilities are basically expected to do, provide access to the need for transparency in the operations. Participation for us is very strong because the law has put it very strongly that all the decisions that we have to make and the decisions that the water service providers have to make have to be backed up with a public participation process. So fairness and in terms of decision making and integrity. The license that is issued comes with, targets, and we have targets in a range of, areas of operations of the utilities, right from quality of service, economic efficiency, and areas of operational sustainability. This forms the basis of licensing, but again forms the basis of us ranking the performance of these utilities on an annual basis. And of course, we've adopted those traffic light colors. How do we enhance compliance? We have developed a framework that looks at compliance as a pyramid of sanctions. And really at the bottom of that pyramid looks at people being able to understand what they're supposed to do before then they are demanded to adhere to that. So training, capacity development is really at the bottom of that pyramid, just to make sure that the utilities understand their obligations and these issues are clearly brought out. The second level of that pyramid of sanction is really the issue of surveillance and prevention of cases of non-compliance. And then that is then escalated to warnings, and at the apex of that pyramid is really the issue of commercial financing. And this comes in handy when the utilities are really performing well. They are more liable to really benefit from support from different partners. And of course, we're saying, as much as it's a pyramid of sanction, the different levels of risk will really determine the level of sanction that is brought in. What have we learned? We still believe that regulation really has a place because of the kind of service that is being offered. We must operate independently. I know in the pyramid of the institutional framework that I presented, unlike the case of ISA, is that we are under the ministry, but again, we have a level of independence in terms of appointments of the board members, and again, a critical aspect of that is financial autonomy. So we are wholly financed by a levy that we collect from the water service providers, and that gives us a lot of latitude in terms of the decisions that we make as a regulator. The need to employ sanctions and incentives as we advance regulation, because what we've discerned over time for the water service providers is that in certain cases, it's not really the willingness to non-comply, but really the conditions that these water service providers find themselves in that really pushes them to get to non-compliance. So they need to balance incentives and sanctions. There is need for transparency. I think I can't overemphasize this. And for us, we have continually published, the performance of these utilities just to ensure that, the public and, any potential partner can be able to make reference to their performance. Seeking customer input is very critical. I think it's been spoken to by the case of Ofwat, really, that the consumers we're serving must have a place in the decisions that we are making as either utilities or regulators. If we have to really be accountable and gain our legitimacy, then guidelines have to be put in place. This is what I'll put in, give us a concluding slide in my presentation. In our case, we separated policy, regulation, asset development, and service provision. And 20 years down the line, I still believe that this is still valid. There's really need for to ensure that all the actors are accountable, that there's really need for separation of these roles across that value chain. The issue of ring-fencing of revenues, if we have to nurture the water service providers to sustainability, the issue of ring-fencing of costs, the issue of tracking these costs, and that any surplus that these utilities realize in the course of service provision is reinvested is very critical. We have to ensure that we have increased user participation. In our case, when we make decisions and we're able to make even tariff reviews during election. Cost recovery through the tariff. We have recently completed a process of developing a national sector investment plan, and a good proportion of the investment to finance that plan really has to come from the tariff. So we have to continually look at internally generated revenues as a means of really tracking and financing sector development. Thank you very much. I think I will pick any other issues that may be there in the course of the panel discussion. Thank you.